Hi, welcome to our next video in applying for a Park and Recreation Trust Fund grant. This video reviews the PARTF scoring system. It gives you an overview of that and a little more information on documents that you need to submit, as well as definitions used in PARTF applications. The PARTF scoring system is one of several tools used to select grant recipients. The PARTF staff review all applications to determine the final scores. As you submit everything with your application, we review that and evaluate it. And then the summary is provided to the Park Authority as they use this in selection of grant recipients. Keep in mind that the system was developed based on leading practices in parks and recreation planning, public involvement, and development. And it is based in the PARTF administrative rules. The items that we'll review today that are in the scoring system are the level of planning for the proposed project, the level of public involvement and support for the project, what the funds are requested for. So are you putting in new facilities, renovating facilities, building trails, or adding support facilities to your park. We also look at the suitability of the site for the proposed project, the applicant's commitment to maintaining the project, how is the park going to be kept up, open to the public to use. And then finally, if you're doing land acquisition, there is the type of site proposed for acquisition that has a score evaluation. So let's start with planning documents. Why does planning matter? This shows that your project is community driven, well prioritized, and ready to succeed. So again, as you look at the bottom here, you'll see the order of things. We have community input, planning, then you do project development, and then you're at the point of creating your PARTF application because you know what you're going to build, and then finally project implementation. With planning, we have site-specific park master plan for a greenway or a park, the comprehensive system-wide plan for parks and recreation, and then the other planning document is a capital improvement plan. So master plan, that's usually for a specific park, so it's very detailed on one site. It's a long-range plan for a park that includes a site analysis, a description of the community's recreational needs, the main purpose of the park, project costs, site plans, and a description of how a broad range of citizens in the jurisdiction was involved in the development of that plan. It is not simply a site plan. It is a full document that has all of these elements. Similarly, a master plan for a greenway system is a long-range plan for building a system of natural corridors and trails linking citizens to the outdoors. The plan must adequately address goals and objectives related to the uses and benefits, look at existing inventory, perhaps some related plans in the communities. We'll see that you've analyzed data to identify potential corridors, hubs, or the threatened open spaces, challenges, and then maps to describe the network that is envisioned. Finally, there'll be an action plan, cost, and description again of how a broad range of citizens in the jurisdiction was involved. So when we review the park master plan or your site-specific plan for the proposed park or greenway, we're looking at several things. Also note this item doesn't apply if you're doing acquisition-only projects. The most important thing is that the project you're applying for the grant for must conform with the plan. So if you're proposing to put in tennis courts, yet in your plan, tennis courts were never listed or recommended by the public with their input, then your proposed project does not conform with the plan. So we want to make sure that it's up to date and that you are providing what has been in the plan. So you need to include the date of the plan creation or an update. So these can be updated if you have one and needs change in the community. Make sure you go through an update process. You can also get an extra point if the plan has been adopted by the local governing board. So the documentation required for this is a copy of the planning document, the local governing board's meeting minutes or resolution if it was adopted, And then we also ask that you list or highlight the page numbers where the proposed project is included. The comprehensive system-wide plan. This is a long-range plan for the entire park system of a jurisdiction. It addresses the recreational needs of all the citizens in that jurisdiction and must address all the following items listed on this page. Must be produced or substantially revised within the past 10 years. Include a description of the jurisdiction's residents and their preferences for recreational activities and facilities. And one of the more important items that a lot of people leave out of these system-wide plans is an evaluation of existing facilities and parkland beyond what's just in your system. So are there other local parks, state parks, school facilities, YMCAs, churches, anything private sector that are in the community and that the citizens of your jurisdiction might use or have access to meet their recreational needs. So it isn't simply just an inventory of the facilities that you manage. There's usually a lot more in your community. So make sure that those are included in your system-wide plan. We're also looking at other things for parkland to be developed, a detailed description of how the local government involved a broad range and representative number of its citizens as the plan was prepared. Some plans are not awarded points because they're missing this piece. So you need to, sometimes you've done it, but you might not have communicated it in the plan. So let us know, make sure it's in the document, how citizens were involved. Was there a random survey of citizens, a recreational needs survey, a series of public meetings that gave most citizens the opportunity to participate, focus groups? There's a lot of ways that you can do this, and this description may be provided in a separate document if it's not included in the plan, but address the number of people who participated and who they represented. So do they match the demographics of your community? And then finally, a local government may use a multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan, like a town using a countywide plan, if it satisfies all the above criteria that were shown here. So again, reach out to your RRS consultant if you have more questions about that. The comprehensive system plan for Parks and Recreation, the proposed project must conform with the plan document, like we indicated with the site-specific plan. So say it's, again, this comprehensive system-wide plan is more general, but the plan documented an area of your jurisdiction where you needed to purchase a neighborhood park or accessible playgrounds were needed in a certain area, then that's how you show that the project conforms with the plan. Again, the plan should be produced or revised within the past 10 years. And if it's a system-wide plan that a local jurisdiction is using, your local jurisdiction should adopt that plan. This is applicable to applications that are doing land acquisition only. Documentation that we're looking for is the actual planning document, the local governing board's meeting minutes or resolution, if adopted, that show that. And again, highlight the page numbers where the proposed project is listed. The capital improvement plan is a multi-year plan that lists all the capital expenditures or all park and recreation projects that a local government has approved for funding and scheduled for the near future. So this isn't a document that just says, hey, we're doing a resolution. If this grant is awarded, we will do this, this, and this. That is when you approve to submit the application. A CIP is, again, part of the regular local government's regular budget cycle, and it must be a component of that. It is advised that you submit the entire capital improvement plan and its adoption with your application. This will help us confirm that it is part of the government's regular budget cycle and that we see the full picture of what you're proposing to do. So the documentation required, again, is a capital improvement plan, the local governing board's meeting minutes or resolution to document that the plan is adopted as part of the local government's budget process. And again, so in this example, you will see that this town shows public facilities, transportation. There's a section for parks and recreation, equipment. And we would like you to highlight the page number where the proposed plan is referenced. So this page would show everything, all the budget line items for this town. And then a reference to the project. If you look in detail for the parks and recreation budget, you will see in this example they were applying for land acquisition, and it is included right here. If you were applying for some of these other things, you can see what fiscal year, and this just shows that the community has this plan in place. We do realize some communities do not do capital improvement plans as part of their budget, but again, more points are awarded for those who have this process to show that commitment to funding the project. Public involvement. So what do we look for when we're reviewing your application? First of all, that the proposed project is presented. You don't have to say it's the grant awarded, but describe the project that you're proposing to do. We're putting in a new picnic shelter, a series of trails, and disc golf. Has everyone in your community had an opportunity to provide input? We know not everyone will be available to provide input, but are they aware of it and had the opportunity to do so? This means that the opportunities were widely advertised using appropriate means. And finally, we want to know that the public supports what you're proposing. Are they in agreement with this? And that the support is received in time to contribute to the proposed project and the plan. So if you're getting public involvement 2 weeks before the application deadline, we're pretty sure it wasn't received in time to contribute to the proposed project and plan. Public meetings. The applicant conducted a meeting exclusively for discussing the PARTF grant project and obtaining comments for the project within the past 24 months. The public supported the project proposed in the application. So we want to make sure what you presented in this meeting is what you're submitting in the application, and the public supported that, and that can be from comments in the meeting, sign-in sheets with comments that supported, and that the meeting was exclusively for discussing this project. So provide description of the means to widely advertise the meeting. You should use 2 or more methods of distribution, so is it social media, flyers, other announcements, and you also need to include the minutes, including the discussion of the proposed project and proof of support from the attendees at the meeting. A survey of recreational needs is a survey of citizens in the local government jurisdiction to identify and determine their needs and preferences for recreational and leisure opportunities. This type of survey is typically used as one of the first steps in developing a master park plan or even a comprehensive system-wide plan. But conducting a survey of recreational needs can also provide a great deal of value being conducted on its own for planning documents. For a recreational needs survey to receive points, it needs to have been conducted in the past 10 years, and the proposed project must have stemmed from or be listed in the survey or results. Also keep in mind the key elements that must be documented in the survey, and these are included on the application guide. One item that's often missed is the survey should include from the respondents at least 3 of the following demographics, and this is how we want to ensure a representative sample of the population in the jurisdiction. So either age, gender, education level, race, ethnicity, household income, or household size. So at least 3 of those should be in the survey. And then you need to communicate how those results match with your population. So again, when we review it, was it conducted in the past 10 years? Does it demonstrate that the proposed project that you're applying for meets the needs that have been expressed by the community? And so what we're looking for is a copy of the questionnaire the survey results, a description of how the survey was distributed, dates that it was distributed, and the number of surveys distributed, the number of respondents. And again, this is where you want to include that demographic information to show that, yeah, the respondents here are how our community is made up. And then finally, a description to show those results support the proposed project. So let's look at an example response rate. This is probably much larger than what you would do, because in this example we're looking at 16 counties. But in the example, you would mail surveys to 500 random households across those 16 counties. That would equal 8,000 total surveys that were mailed. 1,397 people or households returned the questionnaires, 51 completed online responses, and 605 were returned as non-deliverable. So we have 1,448 usable responses divided by the number of deliverable addresses. Multiply that by 100 and you get your response rate of 19.6%. So we're always looking at, does the number of responses large enough to represent the population using this distribution method? And we do 10% is usually a pretty good rate. So again, the questions must be clear and not biased. We want to know what are the preferences in your community. So another piece of public input is civic group support. So local civic groups in your community can be a key demographic to seek input and support when planning a project or obtaining support for a potential project that you'd like to submit a grant for. Well-established civic groups often have relationships and reputations in communities, and obtaining their support can play a vital role in the overall perception and support for a project within the community. So examples of civic groups could include neighborhood associations, youth organizations, applicable nonprofits, non-governmental advisory boards. The applicant presented the PARTF grant project to 2 or more local civic groups and received support for the proposed project. And this must have been presented in the past 24 months. The documentation required is an agenda, correspondence, or other documentation from the group that confirmed the meeting dates and presentation given by the applicant. The correspondence should also include proof of support of the project. Groups solely submitting letters of support does not count as a presentation. The letters should be something that correspondence that document the presentation and the proof of support. For example, thank you for coming to our meeting and sharing with us the proposed grant project and the items that you're going to develop at the park. Our group is in full support of this project and know it will be beneficial to the community. So those are the items that you must have. The other group is the Park and Recreation Advisory Board. So these are citizen panels that provide guidance and recommendations to local governments in the development, maintenance, and operation of parks, recreation programs, and facilities. So the applicant should present the PARTF grant project to the Park and Recreation Advisory Board, or if you don't have a Park Advisory Board, there may be a similarly appointed board that you can present to get support. And again, it would be a non-elected board or group. You should receive a motion of support for the proposed project. And again, your documentation that you submit to show this approval would be meeting minutes that include support for the project. And again, a letter of support does not count as a presentation. The next part of the scoring system is where are the funds that you're requesting, what are they going towards? What are your proposed facilities? So here's some examples. There are recreation and their support facilities. Recreation facilities might be sport courts, fields, campground, court games. And also keep in mind that if you're doing a trail, for it to get points as a recreation facility, it must be a 1/4 mile or more in length. Otherwise, if it's shorter than that, it'll just be a walkway. They're all important. Got to be able to get from place to place in the park. But to count as an official trail, it must be at least a 1/4 mile. Indoor facility, a lot of times that's one building, but it might have different recreational facilities within it. And we'll show you an example of that. Support facilities are eligible expenses for PARTF. You don't get points for a recreation facility, but again, these are important infrastructure in the park. Support facilities include restrooms, lighting, bleachers, walkways, maintenance buildings, parking lots, and entrance areas. If you're renovating a facility, keep in mind that renovation is the extensive reconstruction of a facility to restore or improve its usefulness to the original purpose. No points are awarded for renovation if the deterioration is due to inadequate maintenance during its reasonable lifetime. But also note that renovating a recreational or non-recreational facility for a new use, that can allow that to be counted as a new or like facility in the scoring system. So say you're changing an old multi-purpose court, you're repurposing it. So look in the application guide, make sure you take a look to see the list of examples of indoor facilities, recreation facilities, support facilities. Indoor facilities, which we talked about, again, you might have a gymnasium. It could include a fitness room, multi-purpose room, arts and crafts, pottery room, weight rooms. A lot of different things could be in there, and each one of those could be a separate facility. That's why it's important to submit the floor plan with your site plan in addition to it. Site suitability is also examined when you submit your grant application. We look at impacts, so what are the environmental impacts to the proposed project? Is there extensive grading, a lot of stormwater management that's going to cause a lot of impact as you build the park? What is the location or the adjacent uses? Do they complement the park, or do they impact the visitor experience? Perhaps there's limited barriers to pedestrian and visitor access. So all those things are looked at for location, and then we want to make sure that the site accommodates the proposed development. Does everything fit on the site? Are there overhead power lines that might limit development, or other intrusions, say easements through there? A lot of those are suitable. There are suitable things to build on top. You're putting in trails over the easement, parking areas. Those are the items that we're looking at for site suitability. And then finally, we're looking at the commitment to maintain the project. This is evaluated based on the local governments or the applicants, their staffing to maintain the project over the next 25 years. Most points are given to local governments that have a full-time Parks and Recreation department. And this usually means a line item budget and personnel. A department level agency demonstrates commitment to Parks and Recreation for the community over time, and it's shown a better level of maintenance, programming, and service to the citizen, which is why that gets a little more points than the others. We also have full-time staff such as Public Works will manage the site, part-time staff or contractual agreement to manage the site, or organized volunteer groups such as the Civic Group or Youth Sports Organization who will operate and manage the site. So all of these are fine and can be very successful, but that is just the order in which points are given. And then with land acquisition, if that's part of your project, we'll look at the quality of the proposed acquisition. Is it a valuable natural or recreational resource? And if not purchased at this time, a significant resource will be used for other purposes. That has the highest number of points. Most things fall under, this is an excellent natural or recreational resource for acquisition, or it's just an average one, which is great. You're adding land to your system, but we just have varied point values based on those categories. So a summary of key points. For meetings and public engagement, make sure you provide evidence of advertisement with methods that you advertise, the dates, highlight and list page numbers of where we can find references to this project, because a lot of times the minutes it's a much bigger meeting. Upload a copy of the minutes. Do not provide a hyperlink to a website. That could be broken, not work, and we wouldn't be able to find it. And you don't want, if the review team must search through items that you submit as evidence, it's possible that your information will be missed. That's why it's important to point out where these are to make our review efficient and ensure that we find it so you get the credit for those points. And also remember that only items submitted with your application by the deadline are considered part of your application. You cannot send anything after the deadline, we cannot accept it as part of the review. Planning and surveys, make sure you describe how it was distributed, how the public was engaged, and tell us about the results. How are the demographics of the respondents aligned with the population of your community? Also, how do the results demonstrate that the project proposed through this application will meet the recreational needs of your community? And that leads us to just, the most important thing is tell the story. You want to tell the park authority why your project should be funded over anyone else's. So you do so by just sharing how this project will impact the community. So you can look at it as a big picture story. Say, we're proposing to build the only accessible playground in this region of our county. Or for example, trail connections that we're proposing with this project will allow pedestrian and bike access from the surrounding community. And then think about the example data types that can illustrate this impact. It might include you providing the number of households that will now have access via the trail connection. The distance that community members must drive to access similar recreation opportunities will now be cut in half because it's close to home. The community population served by this park is 78% age 65 and above. So this could demonstrate why the proposed facilities will be used. It could be similar if you have a population with a lot of children in the community. Another example would be a community center will provide affordable or free resources or programs for neighboring residents who are at or below the state poverty level. And give those numbers. What are the numbers? This is how you can tell the story of the impact and document the need for your community. Thank you. That's the conclusion of the scoring system and definitions. Again, if you need assistance, please visit RRS's website and talk with your regional consultant.